Hey, here we go.
Allison did a little solo for it.
22. We have the function f of x, which is a piecewise function, 7 over x when x is less than 0, and then negative 7 when x is greater than or equal to 0. Alright, this is a 7, by the way. It doesn't look like a 7, but it is. And we are supposed to figure out the limit of the function when it approaches 0. Right? So we've got to find the limit as x approaches negative infinity of f of x. We've got to do the limit as f of x as x approaches positive infinity. It looks like they want us to take the limit of f of x as x approaches 0 from the negative infinity side, and then the limit of f of x as x approaches 0 from the positive side. Okay? So we got to do all these. Now, the positive and negative infinity, we're going to have to plug in two separate numbers, okay? So here's the thing. Where does it change at 0, right? Let me show you a little trick about graphing piecewise functions. I'm going to clear all this out. I'm going to do the top portion first. Or, I'm sorry, the negative portion. So when x is less than 0, see this where it says x is less than 0, we use the function 7 over x. So I'm going to plug in 7 divided by x. Now I'm going to set my window, and I do this on purpose. What is my maximum value? 0, right? And so I'm going to put this at negative 10 and 10 for my y. I'm not sure if it'll fit or not. And so I'm going to graph it. So we see here a function that looks like this. And so what that means is if I were to graph this, and I'm going to graph a very small graph to kind of get a visual over here.
Wait,
what?
my graph's like the opposite of that.
It shouldn't be. Well, you got to set your window the way that I've set it.
Oh, okay.
I'm just honing in on the third quadrant.
Oh, I messed up the window.
Yeah, the function is one of those, it's a hyperbola, right? But I'm only interested for the values when x is less than 0. So basically, this is what my function looks like. Okay? And that's for this portion of it right here. Okay, I'm going to come back in and clear it out. And now I'm going to plug in negative 7. But this is for values greater than 0. So I'm going to come in, my minimum value would be 0, and I'll go to 5. Okay? Now I'll graph that. And so from there, this portion of my piecewise function, and it's including 7, goes through there. So that's my function. All right. So now let's look at this thing and determine what the limits are. What's the limit as we approach negative infinity? 0. What's the limit as we approach positive infinity? Negative 7.
How?
If we go this way, all right, so let's this is where you guys are getting confused, I think. We're approaching negative infinity and positive infinity in the x direction. So that means for this, I'm approaching this way. As x approaches negative infinity, in other words, as I come around this orange curve and go towards negative infinity, what is that orange line value approaching? 0.
Yeah, I understand that one, but I don't.
Okay, so now we're going to follow f of x and go towards infinity. And what is it? What is the value there?
Oh, okay.
Negative 7, right? Does that make sense? I'll pause and give you guys a second to let it sink in.
How do you know to, when looking for the limit of positive infinity, how do you know to look at the pink line rather than the...
Well, the curve is the orange and the pink line, right? So what is the x value approaching? In this case, x is approaching positive infinity. What is the x-axis? This is the x-axis. So, how do I approach positive infinity in the x direction? I go this way.
Okay, so you just look at that.
Yeah. Now, what do I do? I follow the curve this way. So the pink line is the curve. So I'm going to follow that pink line in this direction. Okay? Now on the first one it says f of x, which is the curve, as x approaches negative infinity. So I'm going to put my finger on the curve, and now I'm going to head in the x direction towards negative infinity. Does that make sense? Are you guys getting the x and the y confused? The limit is the y value, but this is x approaches negative infinity as x approaches positive infinity. Okay? Now let's do it with the 0. F of x as x approaches 0 from the negative direction. Now here, this takes on a whole new meaning because we're approaching 0 from the negative direction. Well, what 0? The x value approaches 0. So now I'm going to go on the curve and I'm going to approach 0 from the negative direction, from negative infinity. So I'm going to follow the curve this way, and what does it look like my y value is approaching? So as x approaches 0 from negative infinity, what is my y value approaching? I said the answer. I meant to say, yeah, it's negative infinity, right? So now let's do the right-handed limit. If I do the right-handed limit, I'm going to approach in the x direction 0 from the positive infinity side. So my pink line is the curve, and I'm going to come this way. What does that look like it's approaching? Negative 7.
Wait, how does it look like it's
What's your question?